Hi, and welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Kitchen Conversations. I appreciate you stopping by. Today's guest is very inspirational and has had quite a life. Everything from pirates to pickleball. It's a story of resilience, survival, and success. Kyle, good morning, and welcome to my little podcast. Welcome to Kitchen Conversations, and it is so great to meet you this morning. We've been chatting a bit back and forth in the background, reached out a couple months ago to say hello, and you've been so generous to stay in touch and agree to be here. So I want to start by saying thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Mike, thanks again for having me on. It's always an honor to be on anybody else's podcast. I'm used to having the guest, so it's always fun to be the guest.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we'll expect perfection then. Nothing but perfection. You're a trained professional, right? So I'm the guy on the side of the mic with no idea what he's doing. So I'm going to rely on you heavily today to carry us along. But listen, you have got one of the most fascinating stories beyond the courts, beyond the game of pickleball that you and I both love, Kyle. Just the research that I've done. You've led a life.
Absolutely. So a little about me. So I was born in San Diego. I had a pretty rough upbringing. Both of my parents were addicted to methamphetamines. They're both recovered addicts now. So shout out to them. As a child, I moved a lot in California. I ended up moving to Idaho the summer going into the third grade. I came up here. My parents were split. They split when I was in kindergarten. So I actually did kindergarten twice because I didn't take the divorce very well. So did kindergarten twice. Summer going into the third grade, I moved to Idaho. I came up for the summer to spend with my dad, who was living with my grandmother. And I think just like the stability of how it was going there, he was working on getting clean. My grandma was definitely a pillar in my upbringing going forward. I called my mom and I was like, hey, I'm not coming home. So third grade, I moved up here, Idaho. Growing up, I was big into sports, football, skateboarding, rugby, snowboard team. If you could compete in it, track and field, I did shot put and discus. If you could compete in it, I wanted to do it. I kind of got into video a little bit with skateboarding. My mom actually one Christmas bought me a Hi8 Sharp camera, and I started, filming some skateboarding videos and downloaded a pirated version of like Sony Vegas and Premiere Pro or Premiere back then, and didn't get good at editing, but like for a kid, I was pretty good. So, making some skate videos. So I loved video. And then football became kind of my big sport. I was an offensive lineman, second team all conference, had a few offers to go play college ball at really small schools, but they weren't full ride offers. So I would have had to work and play football. And I don't come from a family with money at all. So in my head, I'm like, how am I going to play football and work? That sounds awful. So I decided to join the Navy. Joined the Navy as an electronic technician. So what that entailed is basically went to Great Lakes, Chicago area, did my boot camp, and then Norfolk, Virginia. I did a school because I worked on identification friend or foe radar. That was like my specialty, was that radar. So I went to school in Norfolk for about a year and then ended up in San Diego, ironically, where most of my family was. That's where I ended up on my ship. I was on the USS Kidd. It's a destroyer. And, we did 2 deployments. So my first deployment was a very basic deployment. Just did my job, came back, and I wanted to do more. So there's this team called the Visit Board Search and Seizure Team, BBSS, and you have to go to like a separate school for that. And you have to have your captain approve it, and you got to pass it. And it's basically you have to get second class swimmer qualified. You got to learn how to shoot. You go through like kill houses. Like it's all taught by ex-Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon. Like they were like, it was American Training Group was the name of the guys that taught us all the like close quarters combat stuff. And so you go through that, you learn how to climb and rappel and stuff like that. And so I got on that team. And then on the second deployment, this is kind of where the pirates came in. On our second deployment, we were actually specifically doing counter-piracy operations. So we're just floating around, approaching various vessels and, really just like reaching out to them, seeing how it's going, if they've seen any weird activity in the area. And that was when it was in January 2012, we came across an Iranian fishing vessel. And so we radio them and then they radio us back and they speak a language so they're come to find out they were being held hostage by Somali pirates, but they spoke Urdu, which our chief engineer spoke, and the Somalis didn't speak it. and they basically were like, hey, we need help. So that night when it got dark, we sent our helo out with FLIR, and there were supposed to be about a dozen people on board, and there's like 20 something people on board. So like obviously they're being held captive. So that night we got the call, and they're like, hey, tomorrow morning, real boarding. And we're all kids. We get all pumped up the next morning to go. I'd say like the oldest guy, we had like a couple older guys on the team, but I'd say the average age of us was like honestly 19 to 22. So, being
Jeez.
37 now, I'm like, man, we were kids.
Yeah.
So that next
Yeah, for
morning,
sure.
go over, do a boarding. These pirates are they're hiding on the ship. So essentially we go through clearing rooms, tying them up, get them off the fishing vessel, send them to the Seychelles to be prosecuted. And this was in like the New York Times. This is my 15 minutes of fame. Like this was in New York Times and like every paper in America. And like I'm on the cover. And what's funny is when this happened, they basically shut off all communication. So like I can't talk to anybody at home for like 2 weeks. And then when we finally get communication back, I get all my friends from high school like, dude, you were on the paper and this and that. And like
It's unreal.
like two weeks have transpired already before I can even talk to anybody.
Wow, Kyle. But take me to that moment though. I mean, you realize the night before that it's happening.
Yeah.
This is happening tomorrow morning. We're literally like,
Yep.
no pun intended. We're pulling the trigger.
Yep.
This operation's going. We've got the green light. That had to be hard to sleep, number one, that night.
It was like Christmas morning.
Oh, I can't imagine. I mean, I think a lot of guys train at the highest levels, which it sounds like you did, and very few get to execute.
100%.
And so for you to have that chance, to do what you trained to do, it must have been a
Oh,
moment.
we were so excited. And again, I mean, this is probably from my upbringing, living in fight or flight for so long, but like I'm a huge adrenaline junkie. So it was like, this was legitimately like going to Christmas Eve, waking up to Christmas morning. We were so excited.
Wow, what a story. What a story. Thanks for sharing a bit of that. Again, we talked off camera and I told you I met the girl next door and I love her to death and we've been married 33 years, but we are as vanilla as ice cream gets. I mean, we're this boring bucket. No one's put a scoop in us in 30 years, Kyle. Like no one's interested in what we're doing. And this podcast is the most interesting thing that I've ever done in my life. And not because of me, I'm on the wrong side of the mic, but it's guys like you and your stories. And we haven't even touched on pickleball yet, which is, a story unto itself. But what a life, what a moment for you to have done that though. Wow.
It was so awesome. And then basically the rest of my Navy career is pretty vanilla. But I do very cliche. I meet my first wife in the Navy, get out of the Navy, move back to Idaho, get married. That marriage lasts about a year. And
it happens.
But from the Navy, I went directly into offshore oil. So my first assignment, again, I'm an electronic technician in the oil field now. So doing kind of the similar stuff that I did on radars, but now I'm working on motors and radars on the rig and anything that has electronics, they expect us to work on. So I don't know if you've seen drilling equipment like out to sea, but essentially we have like the drilling equipment can be 100 feet in the air. And I'm having to hang, and again, this is where Adrenaline Junkie comes in. I'm basically sitting on a piece of wood hooked up to a winch that's operated by a guy from Louisiana with the nickname Pig. And no, I'm not kidding. Pig, Big Head, these are all guys on my rig.
Pig. Why?
And, they're operating this winch, and I'm up there 100 feet suspended in the air working on like electronic J boxes and wires and stuff. And again, feeds into that adrenaline. So I ended up doing that for 5 years. I worked in Thailand for a year, Singapore for a year, Gulf of Mexico for 3. And we get super into ping pong. So we got a ping pong table on the oil rig, and we start playing for money, and we're being paid way too much money. So there's a couple times we've played for like $100 a game playing ping pong. So we play ping pong, we get super into it. Then I'm still in the oil rig. I meet my second wife. And this is where pickleball actually comes in. So I forgot how it exactly happened. It was, I think, March of 2019. Her parents are like, hey, have you ever heard of pickleball? And I'm like, no, what's that? And they're like, well, it's kind of like tennis, but it's kind of like ping pong, but it's like you're standing on the table. And I'm like, wait, well, that sounds cool. So I get on Amazon and I order a 4-pack of Rally Tyro Pro paddles. And then the first ball that pops up was like the Onyx Fuse, I think. It was like the soft Onyx ball. So like their SEO is great. This is the number one things to come up. So I order them, play one time, which uh, my ex-wife's grandfather's partner pops his Achilles like the first time we play, which is pretty common. But I'm addicted. So like I come home and I get on Facebook and I'm like, hey, where do we play pickleball in Boise? And one of my friends that I had met from drone racing, because I flew like the FPV drones, he's like, hey, go to this park and they'll teach you how to play, and this is where you go. So I show up by myself with my paddle, and like I'm just met by like the nicest people I've ever met in my life. It's like it was one of the most popular parks in Boise. Rest in peace. Boise Parks and Rec killed it last year. Uh, but I'm welcomed in. I'm the youngest guy by a lot at this point. Like we see a lot of young people playing now, but at that point, I'm roughly 30 years old. I'm very young to be playing pickleball. So I'm addicted. My first game, I'll never forget. I played against their names Chin and B Lee. They were ex badminton players, and they beat me 11-0. I don't remember who my partner is, but I remember being beat so bad that I'm like, I am going to learn how to play this game, and I'm going to beat these guys.
Yeah, I love your story. I mean, all of that. Thank you. I mean, that let's just not lose focus of everything you've just shared about the rig and the work that you've done. I just unbelievable. I mean, we could end the podcast right now. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and we'll catch up to you. Just amazing, Kyle. What a story! And I think the resilience of the human spirit. You've been through a lot as a kid, obviously, and not a typical upbringing for sure, but yet through that, the success that you've had, as a person and to find pickleball at some point in your life, and it all just kind of comes together, and just a great story, just a terrific story. I appreciate you sharing some of that today. It's very personal, but thank you. Yeah, it's such a funny path that we find ourselves following, and I think I'm 59. So I'm at a point now, Kyle, where I can just start to begin to draw lines backwards to decisions perhaps and choices that I made or maybe didn't make that have led to good things for me. And you must be able to do that at this point where you made a choice at one point to go this way, not that way, and look what happened. You know what I mean? And yeah, and pickleball is part of it. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And pickleball is part of, I was to say, joining the Navy. I always tell people like that was probably the decision I made in my life that made me go the right direction. I could have I was set up to go the wrong direction.
Absolutely. You had every reason to, and no one would blame you for that. I mean, in all fairness, but I've got two boys, 28, 25, and I'm trying to teach them, but you can't teach it. You got to learn it.
You
You
gotta
got
live
to
it.
earn it. And you got to live it, my friend. You do. And they can't quite get their head wrapped around what's happening to them right now in their life and the significance of those choices 10, 20, 15, 30 years from now, whatever. So yeah. So that moment for you, you fell in love with it. Walk me through what you did next, because clearly it motivated you to get better. You wanted to
Yep.
beat these people, and I assume that's what happened.
So I did. I basically I dove in. There's like we have a Facebook page called Boise Pickleball. So I get on there and start like looking for other places to play. And then the first thing I do is I find they have this Wednesday night um, thing that one of my best friends, Kirk, had set up. He wasn't my best friend yet. I didn't know him. But so he was actually like a national champion wrestler, big athlete, coaches MMA fighters. And he was like one of the OG 5-0s in Boise. And he had set up this thing on Wednesday where they would go to the park with a lot of good players and they would mix in with everybody to kind of help bring just the level of the community up. So I find out about this. I'm like, ooh, I got to go check this out. It was called Wednesday Night at Willow. So I go there and I meet, his name's Kirk White, and his wasn't his wife yet, but Kelly. I actually just posted a reel playing with them last night because I was playing with them and kind of wrote about like how it's just amazing how, I met them in the beginning and like is still playing with them. But, and they start giving you advice and they're like, hey, like they can tell when somebody was like athletic and they're like, hey, this is what you got to do. And like they teach you because I mean, you can get a lot of bad advice in pickleball. Where I know some of the first advice I got like run to the kitchen, run to the kitchen. They're like, no, don't run to the kitchen. They're like, hit your good shots, move to the kitchen. Exactly, like don't be in a rush to get there. Be strategic about getting there, and it'll take you far and quick. So I meet them. I start getting a little better. I play in the first tournament happens, and back then like there was no money. Like you played for I think it was a food drive, so you brought like 2 cans of food at your entry. And it was like the Willow Lane Classic is what they called it. And I entered the 3-0 division, and it was like a 2-day tournament. And I didn't lose a single game at that point. And they're like, all right, you have to play the 3-5 division, which I get smoked in, but it was definitely a better level for me to play in was the 3-5. And again, I'm addicted. I'm like, all right, now I need a better paddle. So I start looking into paddles. I'm like, what's the best? And at that point, Selkirk Amped series was like the paddle, but it was $150. And I'm like, holy smokes. Like I paid $20 for my paddle. Like in my head, I'm like spending $150 on a pickleball paddle seems insane, but I do it anyway because I'm addicted. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was the Selkirk Amped Omni was the shape, which is like this super elongated like shape and this tiny, tiny handle. And I hold it like I'm holding a ping pong paddle with like two fingers up on the face, and I'm super wristy because I still think I'm playing, ping pong. And so that was my first paddle.
Yeah, but Kyle, that moment when that happens, you're in. Like you're in so
Oh,
deep, there's no getting out. And
no,
we've all been there. And those that haven't played, those listening to this today, that are maybe thinking about the game. This is fair warning from both Kyle and Mike. Be careful, because the
yeah,
next step is the last step you'll take. Like once you're
it's
over that line, there's no turning back. There's no
it's
turning
slippery
back.
slope.
Yeah, and your point about the advice is great. I'm still getting it, 3 years into the game, and part of the problem is it's all well intentioned, but the
Yeah.
truth of the matter is, everybody can develop their own style in this game, and I love that
Mhm.
part of it. You don't necessarily have to follow a certain way of playing. I mean, there's obviously some basic stuff that makes sense, but we all develop our own court management style. We all develop, how comfortable are you and I in the non-volley zone versus someone else in the
Yep.
transition zone. And so, if there's something about the game I love, it's that there's not one recipe for success. You can sort of take some of the basics and apply them, and that's good. But boy, the advice that we get, we get, and not just pickleball advice, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Pickleball people love to tell you how to live your life, not just.
And so, but some of it's great. I'll say some of my best
Uh-huh.
mentors have been met through pickleball. So
100%. Yeah. Wow. What a game. So let's talk about today. I mean, you just played in a pretty big event. You and I had originally booked to do this last weekend, and then you realized that you were playing in a pretty big tournament. And let's talk about how that went. I hear it went well for you.
it did. So this last weekend, I played with my partner Molly. We played mixed doubles 4-5 in a golden ticket event that was local, and we took gold. It was fun. There was 5 teams in our division, and none of them were local, which is my favorite. There's nothing worse than spending $100 plus to just play teams you play every week. So it was fun to get a bunch of different looks. We went out. So it started with round robin play, games to 15. We lose game one. We lose game one 15-13. So close game. We played really, really tight. And then, we kind of took a step back, talked it out like, hey, just play our game. She's super athletic. She played D1 basketball. Uh, I'm like, and she hits the ball harder than probably 90% of dudes. She crushes it. So I'm just like, just let it rip. Get out there. Let's grip it and rip it. Like our strength is that we are very good at playing organized chaos. So then we don't lose a single game again until the finals, and we end up playing that same team we lost to in the finals, which was 6 games later. So because you played round robin and then into brackets, and then so we end up playing that number one team again in the finals, but it's best of 3-11. Game one, we go out there and get smoked 2-11. So then we're like, man, what do we do? And the female on the opposing team, she's really good at dinking. Her name's Amy, and I'm like, I'm not gonna let her dink. Like she's better at dinking than us. So I start speeding up down her line more, and we end up winning the next 2 games, 11-6, 11-5 to win the gold.
That's a great point you've just made. But I think a lot of people get into a tournament situation and they don't adjust. And I
Mhm.
think the players like you that can see it and recognize it, that's where the success comes in tournament play. Because if you get trapped into playing your game, quote
Yeah,
unquote, your game, it doesn't work against everybody. And you
no,
clearly recognize that against Amy and said, we just can't give her that ball. And if you don't give it to her, she can't use it. So,
yep.
yeah, good on you guys. Where does this lead now? So, that ticket, for those of us that don't follow it that closely, tell me what that ticket does for you.
So that qualifies us to play in nationals, which will be in San Diego in end of October, early November. So basically, the National Pickleball USAP National Pickleball Championship. So I'll go down there and play it. It'll be at the Barnes Tennis Center, and so that'll be my first time ever playing in nationals. And I'll be playing at the 4 or 5 level, which is super exciting. So
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on that. It's like this is like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You've got the ticket. You're going to the big show now. Good for you. Wow, what a story. That's awesome. For those that have never done a tournament, Kyle, give me your insight on that. I'm a rec player. I'm a social player. I've done some regional tournaments. I've done okay at the 3-5 level. It's kind of where I plug into things. But my real love for the game, as I mentioned, are the people behind the paddle. So I find I get most of my enjoyment from the game and just going out to those Tuesday morning, paddle rotation kind of social games, mixing it up, meeting people. But I do enjoy the tournaments, but my stomach is just grinding. It's a different feeling. And then there's, depending on the tournament, the structure of the tournament organizer, be a lot of sitting around on a tournament day. And that's, people who have asked me about it. It's always what I've told them is, it's much, much different than being out at a social game because you've got to manage the mental side when you're not on the court. You've got to be game ready. And so I'd love your professional insight. What would you say to someone that's never done a tournament? A, would you recommend it? And B, what advice would you give to someone that's going into their first tournament?
So I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't think tournaments are for everybody, and I do think as you get, we joke about this, like pickleball almost gets less fun the better you get. Like you said, that 3-5, like I still want to go to the park and play with all the 3-5s because the enjoyment is there. Like it is so much fun to just go get in a paddle rotation, meet new people, hit some stuff that like maybe you wouldn't hit in a regular game, work on some like more unique shots that are more fun to hit. Because dude, tournament play it's definitely way more high pressure. The nerves are higher. You paid $100 to play in this tournament. You don't want to let your partner down. So depending on how you are, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. Some people put a ton of pressure on their partner. I'm not one of those. I'm a very positive partner where I want to bring my partner up, but I've seen partnerships where they get really down on their partner, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I don't think like if somebody was that negative towards me, that's not going to make me play better. Honestly, it's going to like stress me out more.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you went there, and I'm glad you did. And I was kind of hoping to lead you down that conversation because I don't think tournaments are for everybody. I really don't. I think that it really can take a lot of the fun out of the game. The reason we fell in love with the game, tournaments can sometimes take some of that off the table for sure. So
I will say the exception to that though is when the tournament is like a fun-based tournament or charity-based tournament, like Dink for Pink for breast cancer awareness, all that kind of stuff. Like I'm 100%. I have a mental health tournament coming up in May, and it's like a fun MLP style format. And like those tournaments, though, I feel like everybody should get involved. But the PPA, the APP, the USAP tournaments, that's more so if you were like super competitive. But if you want like a little bit of competitiveness, look for those local tournaments that are supporting a cause. I think everybody should get involved with those.
that's an excellent point. Yeah, we do a team challenge here a couple of times a year. The club will run one, and it's just they put a couple of 3-0s, couple of 3-5s, 4-4-5s, and it's just a mixed team event over a 3-day weekend. And it's some of the best pickleball you'll ever play. And it's a great chance to step into quote unquote a tournament environment, get that amped up feeling, because it's a little more pressure when you're playing for a team because you've got to go in and do your part, win the points, and hopefully move up the ladder. But yeah, good advice. Great advice. But I want to go back just very quickly. You said something about your partner, and I can remember one game, Kyle, a slightly more competitive game that came out of the social group. And we're going along, and my partner's rolling his eyes and he's sighing, and you can just feel him. And I remember stopping the game and just kind of pulling him aside. And I said, listen, we just went from you and I against those two guys to me against three. Like I'm more worried about you than those two guys. Plus we've got the net in the way, and that's, sometimes the third opponent. So like knock it off. Like, and the other pet peeve or pickleball pain point is when someone tells you, your partner, that, the one that was a foot and a half over your head that you swung at, and ticked with your, like, when they look at you and say that would have been out, yeah, I know. And I just don't see an upside to telling somebody the obvious. And so I'm glad to hear you don't do that, but I just think it's a reaction. People can't help it. But when I'm 6'2" and I'm reaching with an arm this size, and I knew that was probably going into a whole different postal code. Like there's no reason for you to tell me that, but there's some people just can't help themselves.
Well, so I was gonna say, sometimes I know I have the problem is like you react faster than your brain. I mean, like especially when the ball is coming towards your face. I mean, like sure it was out, but like my instinct was to put a paddle up there. Like, So that's definitely a skill. And again, like you said, it's really not something unless it's my friend and I'm poking at like fun at him, like, hey man, that probably would have hit the back wall.
Yeah, for sure. That was heading to the next town just
Yeah.
until you got in the way. Until you touched it, it was well on its way to the next town. But yeah, that's a whole different conversation. We're
Yeah.
picking on our buddy. That's fair play. There's no rules around that. You can do whatever you
No,
want
not at
there, but
all. No, if I body bag my buddy, I tell him to eat it. If I body
100%.
bag somebody that I don't know, then I'm like, oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's trial and error with your buddy. You can do whatever you want, see how he reacts to it. So, well, that's all great stuff. Well, congrats again on the big win and good luck. Yeah, this
Thanks.
fall. I hope you enjoy that. A 4 or 5 level will be some good pickleball for sure. Yeah, love it. So, outside of that, where do you plug into the game today? How often are you getting to play? How often are you drilling? Do you have a promise to yourself that I'm playing less than I'm drilling, or how does that set up in your world?
I don't want to say I don't drill. I drill. I have a group that I do drill with that when I
Yeah,
play with them, they're out of town a lot because they work out of town. But when they're in town, we probably drill more than we play. But
right,
our drilling is playing. Like we play a kitchen game a lot where we call it's
right.
dink dink go. So
Yep.
basically you start with the two dinks and then any shots open from there. And I think that is it's fun, but it's a drill that I think everybody can benefit from
Yes.
because you learn how to speed up, then slow it back down, then speed up. And a lot of times, if you do just play a straight game, especially if you're like that open play, you're not going
Mm,
to get the experience of actually having to work the point at the net. A lot of times, the point's going to end
yeah.
the second somebody's at the net.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
a fun one. I try to play 2 days a week. I have a lot of jobs, so I'm an electrical engineer and I work at a semiconductor facility. I also do the podcast, and I also am the sponsorship director for some pickleball facilities. So I do a lot of juggling. So I try to play 2 days a week. That's like my goal is to play 2 days a week.
Well, the whole drilling concept, we could talk about that all day, Kyle, but it's an interesting thing. And I'll watch people who think they're drilling and
Yeah.
practicing. And, it's a fine line between whether you're wasting your time or actually
Mhm.
benefiting your game. And I think what you're suggesting, get into something where there's an actual purpose to it. I think
Yes.
that's time well spent. But I do see a lot of people coming out to our local club. They'll spend 30 minutes on the court and listen, every time your paddle touches the ball, it's good. I mean, there's
Mhm.
no there's no one's going to argue it's a downside to that, I guess. But I think if you can step back and you think about the game and where do you want to take your game personally, and put some purpose behind your practicing, and you can tell the seasoned players even just before a game as they're warming up, they're starting to dink. Then somebody will drop back. They'll do the third
Yep.
shot drops. They'll come up. They'll do the speed ups. There's a real
Yes.
system to the seasoned players, and if as a rec player, if you step back and kind of watch those guys, you'll learn something. You'll learn
Yeah.
that what they're doing isn't just they're not freewheeling. There's
No.
actually some
Yes.
purpose behind all that. So yeah, that's great. Good stuff. Well, listen, let's jump into Rally 3. I'm watching the clock. So just a couple more minutes of your time would be great. But let's talk about your podcast because, as I said before this started, I'm beyond nervous talking to you today. I've never done podcasting. This is my first run at it. And,
Well, you're
I'm
doing great.
loving it. I'm enjoying it. I'm trying my best, but I'm enjoying it. But I've been watching your podcast from behind the scenes, and I've been following you, and I know a bit of your podcast journey. Can you just run with that for me? Give me a
Yeah.
sense of where did it start for you? Where is it today, and where do you see it going? And let me just finish that question by saying to you just how impressed I am with what you're doing. Your attitude. I'm trying to mimic you in some ways. You're so laid back. You're so easygoing. You're so generous, and there's a certain warmth to your podcast. And I hope that I'm okay to say that because
Oh, absolutely.
I love it. You're the kind of guy that's just sitting around chatting about the game. And so I admire the work you're doing, and I want you to know I'm watching closely and hoping to learn. So I'd say thank you for that as well.
Of course, I love that. I appreciate those kind words. Seriously. So my podcast journey. So about 2 years ago, honestly, if we go 2.5 years ago, I actually had several people tell me like, "Hey, Kyle, you should probably start a podcast." Because I've always been. If we go 2.5 years ago, I was selling. I was actually like the lead diadem salesman in Idaho for like 2 years running. If we go all the way back to the Selkirk, so I'm playing the Selkirk amps. I keep breaking them, and Selkirk's customer service is amazing. They keep sending me new paddles, but I'm like, I got to figure something out. Like one, I don't want to buy paddles anymore, so I find Diadem, who Diadem's owner is actually from Boise. So I reach out to them, and they were relatively new in the time, and I'm like, hey man, do you guys need some ambassadors? So they hooked me up as an ambassador, and back then you actually paid to be an ambassador. So you paid like $300. You got like a big welcome package of a set of demos and clothes and the backpack. And then I started selling paddles as an ambassador. And I quickly realized that I was good at it just because I'm friendly and I go to the park. And um, then I'm like, man, I should find a better way to do this. So I file an LLC with Dink Smash Media, and then I become a wholesaler. So I start getting the paddles from Diadem wholesale. I give a few paddles out to some of my good friends that are kind of pillars in the community, and people see them using the paddles, and like essentially I start selling a ton of paddles. I love to tell the story that like we did a 4th of July sale, and I sold 63 paddles at one park in one day. Rolled up in my Volvo, opened my trunk. I had a license plate that said Dink Smash on it, and unloaded these paddles at this park. Um, so I was big into selling paddles, and I had friends that are, hey man, start a podcast, start a podcast. I'm like, yeah, I don't know, and I was kind of known for being very blunt on social media.
Okay.
If I saw something that I thought was worth calling out, I'd call it out. No, I wouldn't pull any punches. So, and I've always been known to do that. And so Braden had Pickleball Effect, and he'd been growing his brand the whole time. And I'd been watching him. He was doing reviews, and he had his podcast, and he had Logan Brown, then he had Porter, and they had actually talked about me on 2 podcasts. And then Braden reached out to me, and he was like, hey, would you want to do a podcast with me? Because he knew that I had some more video experience than he had at that time. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So then I got on the Pickleball podcast, the Pickleball Effect podcast. That was honestly almost 2 years ago. So we did that. We grew it. At that time, Braden had like 8,000 subscribers on YouTube. A lot of those obviously were from his paddle reviews, not the podcast. And I think he was averaging like 1,500 to 3,000 type, depending on what they were talking about. That's how many views he was getting on the podcast. So we started shooting the podcast at the Flying Pickle, which is the facility that I now do the sponsorship coordinating for. And we just had like a plain white wall. If you go back and watch, we just had like a plain white wall, nothing on it. And we're just 2 dudes sitting at a conference room table, just talking about paddles. So that started to grow. And then about 3 months into it, I landed our first sponsor. And then we eventually go to Eagle, Idaho, and rent a studio for a bit. So we're doing it in somebody else's studio. And so we started shooting, and we learned a lot. I learned a lot about editing and stuff from that guy. And, at that point I was like manually watching through the podcast and clipping it. And he's like, no. He's like, watch it at 4 times speed, watch the audio waveforms. This is how you clip it. So he showed me some stuff that honestly took my editing of a podcast from 8 hours down to like 2 hours. This is before Autopod was a thing. Now Autopod can clip your podcast just like instantly. So we learned a lot there. We got a couple sponsors, and then Braden's like, hey, let's build a studio at my house and just shoot this at my house. And then that was how the set you have now. He started, got the lights and all that stuff. And he had 2 cameras. I had 1 camera. So we had the 3 cameras going. And then, we kept growing it. He's got over 20,000 subscribers on YouTube now. So we ran that podcast till I think I got on at episode 20-ish, and I ran it with him till episode 102, 103, something like that. So, over 80 episodes. And then during that, we did, lots of cool stuff. Flew down to Vegas, played with Agassi, did the Yola launch, flew out to Florida, did the bread and butter tournament. We went down to MLP Salt Lake together, and I got like media passes, and I got to, brush, elbows with all the pros and take photos, and had a great time. But then, come December, a week before Christmas, I got a text from Braden basically saying, thanks for this year. Going forward, I'm getting a new co-host. So
Wow.
like out of the blue, I had no real warning. So I'm just like, obviously right then I'm like super angry. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what do I do? And like, within 30 minutes, I came up with Between the Rallies. Like, no joke. I got that text, and I'm like, well, I don't want to stop podcasting. Like, I'm so used to it now that I want to keep going, and I don't want to just fade away in the industry because I love pickleball and I want to keep growing. So I'm like, life throws you lemons. Let's make some lemonade. So I come up between the rallies and I'm like, all right, I got to think of, some sections. What do I want to do? And previously I had thought about coming out with my own podcast anyway called Hop on a Call, where I was going to do brand owners and stuff because I already had all these connections and I
Sure.
talk to all these people regularly anyway. And some of the conversations I have, I'm like, man, people would be really interested to hear some of the stuff we talk about. So I'm like, let's
Mm,
just run with it. So I came up with between the rallies, started building my own studio. It's a little
yeah.
different looking, I got my Legos and just got my neon sign. But so started building my own studio. Had some, I do it solo, but I try to have some guests. And then, I wanted to focus more though. I still love the paddles, but there's enough
Right.
great reviewers out there that get into the, swing weight, twist weight, add 3
Sure.
grams of weight here and this and
Yeah.
that. And I'm like, I'd rather just talk about how I think the paddle plays personally and then dive into some stories that are kind of what's building the community around pickleball.
Yeah.
So I had a guest, I don't know if you saw Roger Belair, he's doing
Oh, yeah.
pickleball in prison. I had
Yeah.
him on. It actually makes me sad that like my podcast isn't huge yet because I'm like, man, his story needs more views. Like I think that's really important. And I do hope like as I grow, people go back and watch some of those older episodes because I've had some really good guests. So I did Roger Belair, pickleball in prison, and then I had Fit to Serve. I don't know if you're on Instagram, but he's hilarious.
Okay. Yeah. 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 I saw him.
Yeah, so I had him on, and he great story. He found pickleball in rehab. He was also a vet, so great story there. The brand owners are obviously really fun. So I'm having a great time doing it. I just want to keep growing it. And then the sponsorship coordinator thing came to me. They reached out because they knew, I was doing a lot of the interacting with the sponsors with the podcast. So I already had experience working with brands. So that kind of clicked there. So I don't know how far that could take me. I could end up, because that's a franchise. Who knows where that could lead. Pickleball could end up being my full-time career here in the next year or two. And I'm going to find a way to do it.
I love it. Listen, I appreciate all of that. It's Roger Beller is fascinating. I had the luxury of chatting with him as well a couple weeks ago.
Did you do a podcast with him?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
have to go watch it.
Where do you see your podcast going? And what are the hopes for it, let's say, in the next couple of years? Do you have sort of a long-term vision, or are you just taking it podcast by podcast at this point?
I mean, my vision is to eventually just grow. I want to be a podcast that everybody watches. Like I want to have all the best guests, get into like the real stories. Because everybody has a story, and there's a lot of people. We only see surface level of what's going on, and I would like to grow my podcast into having 10,000 plus views where people are learning more about what's really going on in the community. I want to have the adaptive athletes. I want to dig into all those stories that are going around pickleball that some people just don't see. You just see the surface level, the pro game and the amateurs. But there's a lot going on, like with helping people with addiction, helping people with PTSD, all kinds of stuff. Like there's an endless amount of stories that I can go out and find. And I just want to grow into a podcast where people come to my podcast to see that kind of stuff. I'm still going to talk about paddles and stuff because I got to make a little bit of money. I mean, I'm not this big. I'm definitely not retiring off my commission codes.
But it's also a passion. And I think you've got enough playability and knowledge to weigh in on that with some intelligence and to say something that means something. And then that's part of it here. But yeah, I'm with you. I just think, when I got into this, I kind of jumped in a hurry. I was heading off to play in January, thought I'm going to do a podcast, and I ran it by a few people. And then I kind of pulled back and I thought, well, this is a dumb idea. Like A, I'm not a podcaster. B, I've never done it. And C, there's enough of this out there. So what do I possibly have to offer? And I got some really great advice from a buddy at the pickleball club. He said, Mike, think about how many hamburgers are sold every day in the world. And McDonald's is not selling every single one of those. So Harvey's gets a bite, Burger King gets a bite, Wendy's gets a bite, Five Guys, In-N-Out. Like
Yep.
he said, there's always room for another cheeseburger, And we kind of had a laugh about it. And so he said, do it for legacy, do it for, no other reason than just to be able to say one day you did it. And so I did. So I bought the gear and, I've got a little bit of a studio set up here, and you can appreciate that more than others that are listening to this today, what it takes to get to that point, time, energy, and money. But nonetheless, I'm happy I'm here. And And my goal is very simple, Kyle. I just want to inspire somebody to try this game. I go back in the history of it all, back to 1965 and that first game on Bainbridge Island, and the founders, the Barney McCallums and that whole group that brought us this incredible game. And I want to end on that note with you. I just want to pay tribute to the legacy of this game. I talked to Steve Peranto a couple of weeks ago, of course, a Hall of Fame guy.
Yep.
And when you talk to someone like that, you can't not be touched by what this game has meant to him and the work that he continues to do to try to promote and to encourage people to give it a go. And so if I one day get a comment that says, "Hey, Mike, I listened to that podcast with you and Kyle. I really like Kyle. You weren't so hot, but I decided, yeah, you suck, but he was great. Thank God he was, but you know what? I went out and played on Tuesday and I love it." And if I get that, then to
Yep.
me, that's
It's a
my
win.
measurement. Yeah. If
Yeah.
you say, how do you, how are you going to define success in your podcast, Mike? It's that comment, Kyle. I just want it once. Hey, Mike, listen, took your advice, went out and tried it. So yeah, well, listen, this has been amazing. And thank you so much for being so generous. Answering my text, because when I'm creeping people out in February, will you please come on a podcast that doesn't exist with a guy that doesn't do podcast? And here you are this morning with me. So I appreciate that. And congratulate you on, Kyle, just everything from start to finish. I mean, it's a life well led. You've made, great choices. You should be very proud of your accomplishments, and your podcast is beyond incredible. It's going to grow. It's going to be great. And I'm going to be watching and learning from the sidelines. So thank you for doing this morning.
Thanks for having me on. It was a great time, great conversation. And, I'll be following you. And I think, like you said, the cheeseburger thing, I'm a man, like I believe in abundance. There's enough pie for everybody to go around. And again, we all have our different flavors that people are going to want. So again, I know everybody's like, oh man, there's so many podcasts. There's a podcast for everybody though. So.
Well, there is, Kyle. It's a great point. Maybe a good one to end on. And I'd say that, if we want to tie a parallel back to the game that you and I both love, plug into this game, please. Give it a try, and don't feel for a nanosecond that you need to figure it all out. You can go out and play hit and giggle all day long. And if that's your game, if you want to hit that ball and giggle and go out with your buddies and have a beer at the end or whatever, go do it. No, the number of people that want to, that are trying to get to that elite level and play at the US Open and play on the tour, that's a small percentage of people that love this game. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of something in there for everybody. So that sounds great. Well, listen, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for this, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.